Good evening, everybody. It's Sunday, December 3rd, 2017. This evening, I decided I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a video that's going to act as the Tanks for Nothing Part 3, which will wrap up the whole saga of the 7 or 8 empty and full gas cylinders I bought for like 70 bucks or 80 bucks. And also this is going to be an update on the Millermatic 250 MIG welder, because I had somebody ask about that MIG welder and what the status was of that, if I had actually got that welder going and tried it out. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's first talk about the cylinders. One of the reasons why I really wanted to get this video out is because I had just recently watched a video by Chucky 2009, I think is the screen name. I should know it by now. I've watched enough of his videos. I actually enjoy a lot of his videos. He's a professional welder by trade. Has a pretty good following on YouTube. He does product reviews. He does a lot of interesting things. He fixes up old stuff, but occasionally he gets off on a tangent or a rant, and he actually did a rant recently regarding air gas. And you'll have to watch his video to get the whole story, but I think to sum it up, he went to air gas and I guess he tried to get some cylinders refilled or swapped out, and they gave him a bit of a hassle, and they said that he wasn't a customer, or that they couldn't find him in the customer database, even though he said he's been going there for years. But then I guess somebody explained to him, somebody at the dealership said that they switched over the computer system, so a lot of old customer records got wiped out, so maybe he hadn't been there recently. Long story short, they didn't want to take care of his gas needs without, I guess, charging him probably a lot more than he wanted to pay. So he swore off at that point, never going to air gas again, and went on his channel and went on, basically went on a bit of a rant saying, hey, he thinks that they're no good. So everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'd like to give you my opinion based on my air gas experience, and it was positive. So I guess what I really want people to take away from this is the fact that I had a good experience, the fact that he had a bad experience. I think what you really need to think about is that you're dealing with individuals at a particular branch for a company that's a very large company. So you could walk into any given branch and have a positive or a negative experience, and you might have even a branch that you go to all the time and you normally have a good experience, but maybe you get the new guy or somebody you don't normally deal with there and you have a less than positive experience. But I don't think I want to paint with such a broad brush and say that, I think Airgas is a great company because based on my one experience with my one sales guy. So that's just me. So maybe you go by the numbers, right? Well, how many people do you hear complaining about Airgas? Well, quite a bit. So does that mean that they're a bad company? I don't know. Is it possible that the reason why you hear so many complaints about Airgas is because they just have so many places, so many locations? Anywho, let's take a look at these cylinders. All right, so I think we started with 7 tanks, and I believe, if memory serves me, I paid 80 bucks for the 7 tanks. Okay, so out of the original 7 tanks, there was an aluminum one that had the black handle on the top that was more looked like for beverage service, but that was almost a full tank judging by the weight. I sold that for 50 bucks. And then
there was another, I forget if it was a steel or aluminum 20 pounder that also had CO2 in it. I sold that for 40 bucks. So I got 90 bucks for those 2 tanks. And then I took 2 of the cylinder, well, 2 of those cylinders that I I ended up cleaning, sanding, priming, and painting them. Did that in part 2 for those of you who've been following the series. All right, so one of those was the one that had CO2 in it that I sold for 40 bucks. And the other one, which was empty, was the one that I used to swap out at Airgas. So I went to Airgas and ended up saving on the cylinder that I wanted to get. Okay, so those were 20-pound CO2 cylinders. All right, steel. So I swapped a 20-pound CO2 cylinder that was steel, empty, and we'll get to how that worked out for me in a moment. Let's just talk real quick about what's left. So I've got 4 cylinders left. This cylinder right here is a aluminum 20-pound cylinder. This is helium. Okay. This cylinder has gas in it. I don't know how much, but it does have gas in it. This cylinder, which is actually in really good condition, is also a helium, marked helium cylinder. This is a steel cylinder, and the diameter is smaller than this, but it's about the same height, so I'm not sure what size that is. But that cylinder right there is empty. Under this cap, the valve looks quite a bit newer and in better condition, so I think this is a newer tank than these aluminum ones. This cylinder is another aluminum cylinder, marked helium gas. This one is empty. Okay, and this one obviously has been out in the elements for quite a while, so this tank is in kind of rough shape. I could clean this one up. I don't know yet what I'm going to end up doing with that tank. And then this cylinder here is the large oxygen cylinder. You can see the green paint underneath here. This was clearly an oxygen cylinder. It was probably part of an oxyacetylene setup. Somebody painted it blue for whatever reason. This is the cylinder that, because of the size, you might think is a lease tank, but this was the one that was clearly marked on the neck ring up here. It was stamped sold, which indicates to me that more than likely this tank was owned. Now, Airgas right now, they basically want to have a very clear chain of ownership of tanks. So they are now going towards a situation where, and this is part of what one of the peeves was, I think, that Chuck E. 2009 was talking about. He had been buying gas from them for years, and according to him, he says that they switched over their computer system and that a lot of customers were wiped out. So when he walked in, they couldn't find a record of him as being a customer. Well, my counter guy said, well, you know, it's so easy for us to set you up in the system as a cash customer. And that's exactly what he ended up doing, so that we could do the deal for the tank that we're going to get to in a moment. But be advised that according to my local sales guy at my local distributorship, if you bring one of these tanks in that you own from your oxyacetylene, they're going to swap it out for you, but you're going to have an account there. But if you don't have an account there, it's easy for them to set up an account, a cash account for you. So what's the big deal? I guess is my point. All right, so that's an empty tank, by the way. So I haven't decided yet what to do with that. Just recently saw somebody selling a couple of tanks, oxygen and acetylene, without the setup, without the torches and the hoses and everything, and they got like 150 bucks, I think, for the pair, and I don't know how much was in there for gas. But all right, so we got these 4 tanks left, and you know, I'm ahead of the game for 10 bucks, but I also did spend the time cleaning up, sanding those tanks, priming them, and painting them. So there's, you know, there's what's that time and paint worth, right? But I'm not too worried about it, because I ended up getting what I wanted to get in the end. which was a tank for my MIG welder. So here is the tank that I ended up getting from my local air gas distributor for my MIG welder, okay? And this tank is what's called an 80 cubic foot tank. So the straight CO2 tanks are rated by pounds, by weight, and the these tanks here are by volume, because this is a gas mix of 75% argon and 25% carbon dioxide. So typically at most distributors, this will be the largest size tank that you can own without leasing, without getting into a lease. Largest tank you can get without getting into a lease. So you can see, in comparison to the height of the 20-pound cylinder, it's taller. And then you can see next to the like standard, whatever the heck this size is, this must be like 120 or 150 cubic foot oxygen cylinder. You can see the size in comparison to that. So what ended up happening was, I went in there without a tank this size. I went in there with a tank this size, a steel 20-pound CO2 cylinder, cleaned up and painted, old as the hills, and he swapped me out that tank for this tank filled with my CO2 argon mix from my MIG welder for under 40 bucks. So I think that's a hell of a deal. As a matter of fact, it actually came to, it was $33, which was basically, he only charged me for the gas in the cylinder, okay, $33, and then the taxes, okay. So I think I made out really well there. Now, some of you might be wondering, yeah, but Steve, do you own that tank? Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you what I do know. I know that I'm a cash customer on file with them now, and I know that I'm not going to be charged a annual leasing fee for having this tank here in my workshop, and I know that I have my receipt showing when I got this tank. So if I go back within, say, a couple of years of having this tank in my possession, that I'm not going to be charged a recertification fee. So keep all of that in mind, and that's why I'm very happy with the way this whole thing turned out. I took a leap of faith when I bought all these tanks, took a chance on them, and in my particular situation, it panned out fine. Now, that's not to say, I mean, I could have had another salesman and it might have been like, oh, forget it, we don't want to touch those things, forget it. Who knows how it might have ended up if I didn't have the right guy at my distributorship. I don't know. All right, so that's where we ended up here with this. So now let's talk about the Millermatic 250 and where we are with that. Oh yeah, so by the way, here's another example of how Airgas took care of me as a customer. I ended up needing those two springs for the spool in the Millermatic 250 welder a while back, and I ended up buying them through Airgas, and I ended up paying with tax a total of $5.60 for the two springs, which for two springs seems kind of crazy, but these are just genuine Miller parts. So, I don't have to tell you guys who know, who've bought genuine Miller parts before, that you pay for a bolt. If it's a genuine Miller part, it's going to be a lot more money than what a bolt normally would cost. So I think that I was treated really fairly here too. And this is something they didn't have in stock. This is something that they ordered, so it came in with a big shipment or whatever, but it's not like they charged me extra shipping because they was ordering something they don't normally stock or anything like that. So again, I considered this a positive experience, and you notice I was just a cash customer. All right, so let's go take a look at the welder. All right, so here it sits basically as just a place to pile stuff on top of for right now. These are the two springs in question. Okay, so that's a large one there, and then this one here. This one here I probably could have easily have sourced from a hardware store. This one would have been a little bit more difficult because of the size. But you can see these are genuine Miller parts. So those are the ones that I paid $5 and change for. And then we've got my new gun, which I believe was an eBay acquisition. That's ready to go. And a bag of extra tips. And so now I've got my gas cylinder, which will mount there. That must be why they call these spun tanks, because I just spun it all the way across the floor to get here. Alrighty. So now I really only have a couple of items left that I need before I can fire this thing up, which I anticipate getting those within the next probably 45 days or so. One of which is a spool of wire, which I think I'm going to probably end up just going with the Hobart branded wire that they sell at Tractor Supply, because I happen to have a gift card for Tractor Supply that I've had for a long time now, and that'll be good use for that. And then at some point I'll probably try the Harbor Freight branded wire to see how good that stuff is. I've heard a lot of people say that that wire works fine. The other thing that I need, which I have currently ordered, is I need a one of those combination flow meter pressure gauges to go on the tank, so I can measure the flow rate and adjust it and all that. And there's a lot of those out there. And what I found is that there tends to be a Chinese manufacturer that's making a ton of those, and they're being sold all over the place on the internet, and they're all like, they got the same box, they all look the same. And if you buy them where it comes in like the non-pretty box, or the display box, or whatever you call it there, the price drops even more. And if you're willing to wait for a e-packet, I think they call it, or whatever, shipment from China, it gets crazy cheap. I think the one I ordered, I think I paid under $20 shipped for it. And it's probably a cheap Chinese piece of... I'm not a professional welder, and I don't need to rely on that for my livelihood. So, and I've actually read the reviews, and a lot of people just say they're fantastic. Nothing wrong with them. So it's not always the case that cheap Chinese equates junk. And I think we can all agree on that. We've all probably had some tool somewhere that we've picked up at Harbor Freight or wherever off the internet and found that it was perfectly fine and a good value for the money. But I digress. All right, so all I need is that gauge, the wire, and the hoses. And the hoses, I'm probably going to make up my own hoses, because I think I've got some extra hoses from one of the old TIG welders that I bought, and I might have to just change the ends on there. But so that's where we stand with the Millermatic welder. I know, not a heck of a lot, not much of an episode for the Millermatic, but basically we're killing two birds with one stone. We're updating this welder situation, and we're closing out the tank saga. Oh yeah, one more thing about the tanks. Does anybody remember this big beast? That's probably at least a 150 cubic foot argon cylinder. That I acquired that was given to me free with the purchase of my Airco welder, because the guy said that they hadn't had that filled very long before they decided to sell the welder. So his claim is that there's quite a bit of argon still in that tank. So even though it's a leased tank, his figuring was, hey, take it just for the gas, and if when it's empty it's useless, big deal. Well, I explained the situation on that to my local air gas supply company guy, and he said that they should be able to help me out with that tank also, because he agreed that more than likely it is a leased tank. But he said that because of the age and how long that thing's been sitting around, that in more likelihood that the company that originally leased that tank has long since given up on getting any money or anything, or getting that tank back from that that guy. So anyways, so maybe at some point down the road when we're doing the Welder series, well, actually, you know what, I may die of old age before I use that tank up. It's not like I am going into the welding business and I'm going to use a ton of argon. That tank, if that tank is even 3/4 full, I think that's going to last me a long, long time. All right, so I think that about closes out this episode. Hope I didn't bore you guys too much. The last thing I wanted to mention is we're closing in on 5,000 subscribers. I would love to hit that mark for Christmas. So you guys want to give me an early Christmas present, try sharing my videos, or think of a video that you might think of somebody you know that might enjoy it, and try sharing it with them. We'll see if we can't push to the 5,000 sub mark before Christmas. All right, and if this is my last video before Christmas, because it's December 3rd and things get busy, I want to wish everybody a happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. But I don't know, I'll try and get at least one more video in before then, but just in case, you know, the wheels fall off the bus or whatever. All right, take care.